Welcome, everyone, to episode number 0 of the Feature Presentation Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Diamond. You might be asking yourself, why do an episode 0? What is an episode 0? Well, I wanted to do this show for 2 reasons. One, to get the RSS feed out there on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, a couple of weeks before the show officially launches to give people a chance to subscribe, as well as subscribe on YouTube. And I wanted to take some time to explain what you can expect from this version of Feature Presentation. As I said, my name is Derek Diamond. I've been podcasting now for almost 9 years, and I'm also an award-winning filmmaker. My short film, The Parker Syndrome, has won numerous awards at festivals around the world, including Best Actress, Best Screenplay, and Best First-Time Director. And the film industry is something that has fascinated me for a long time. So much so that I changed my original show's format to dedicate it solely to learning more about the film industry. As I mentioned earlier, I've been podcasting now for almost 9 years. I started a show called the Nerd Cave Podcast with a couple of friends of mine back in May of 2013, dealing with the news and pop culture, doing reviews for movies, video games, TV shows. And it was a great introduction to the podcasting medium as far as actually doing it, because I've been listening to podcasting since before the term was even invented. I remember listening to a show through my phone that you had to call a certain number in order to listen to the episode, because I had dial-up internet back then. I grew up in a small town, so we were a little bit behind on the technology, but several months later, I started my original show called The Derek Diamond Experience. I did that as also a challenge to myself because I struggled with social anxieties as a teenager, and I wanted to give myself a reason to overcome that. And I thought, what better way than to force myself to converse with people? So started that show, and it ran for almost 8 years and ran over 330 episodes. Extremely proud of what I've accomplished with that show, because I made connections and have met some now very good friends of mine through doing that show. So I will be forever grateful to that show's run and what I was able to accomplish during that time. In the summer of 2018, I felt like the show was kind of at a crossroads. I was getting a little burnt out on what I was doing with it, and I almost didn't see the point in it. So I decided if I want to be a filmmaker, then I should dedicate the show to that. So in January of 2019, I switched the format to strictly discussing film and TV and having conversations with those who work in the industry, because by then the Parker Syndrome had already been made. But I thought to myself, I can learn so much more, and why not use the podcast as a means to do that? And then that ran until the end of 2021. And then I decided to not relaunch, but do a new show where I would discuss, movie reviews, still do interviews, but I wanted to do more mainstream stuff. So that was the original run of this show. But I quickly realized that it wasn't going to work, because I had just started a new job around the time that I launched the original version of this show. And I quickly realized about 2 to 3 weeks in that this is too much work, because I was spending pretty much every bit of my free time on editing the show, booking interviews, recording interviews, looking up news. All my time, if I wasn't working, I was just obsessed with finding new things about the show. So it wasn't going to work. So I ended that show in March of this year. Also got married last month, and I wanted to dedicate as much time as I could to that and make sure that my now wife had as great of a wedding as she and we possibly could. And that brings us to today with the relaunch of Feature Presentation. If you want to call it Feature Presentation 2.0, you can. I'm going to stick with just Feature Presentation. I wanted to keep that name because of what the show is going to be, and that is covering a variety of topics in the film and television industries. And I want to provide a resource, not just to myself to continue to learn about the film industry, because I do want to shoot another short film in the next few months. But I want to provide the listeners and other aspiring filmmakers with an outlet, with a way to learn more. If someone wants to be an actor, well, they think, okay, well, what do I do? They can listen to this podcast and listen to me have conversations with other actors about how you get your foot in the door, how you should start. Same thing with so many other topics. There's so many great topics and branches that come off the tree of filmmaking, whether it's acting, writing, directing, even marketing, why having an agent is important, why having a publicist is important. How do you get those? What are the specifics that you have to do to get to different aspects of the industry, whatever you want to work in? So my long-term goal is to eventually have a full website complete with tutorials, how-to videos, maybe do some classes, but that's way further on down the line. But I want this podcast to be the genesis of that. And I live in Pensacola, Florida, located on the Gulf Coast, and we have a great filmmaking scene here. And it's like everywhere else in the world, COVID kind of derailed it a little bit. But now that that's hopefully we're at the end of the tunnel with COVID, but you're hearing of more projects that are happening. And I want to provide people with an outlet for that, because, whether it's, tutorials on YouTube that I've watched, or going to local meet and greets, or just, conversations I've had with people that I know work in the industry. I want to provide people with that while also learning more myself. So that's what this show is going to be. And I mentioned that I had started the Derek Diamond Experience as a way to challenge myself to learn new things and how to converse with people. I also want to continue to challenge myself with this show. And that is why the show is going to be live every week, because it's something that I like doing. I also do a live show with my good friend Jason Robbins, the Nerd Cave Retro Show. We do that show live every week. And I like the ability to be able to take questions from people who might be watching, comments from people who would be watching. It just adds a new element that I haven't really ran too many live shows. I did the occasional Facebook live show for the Derek Diamond Experience, but this show will be live every Monday night on YouTube at 8 p.m. Central Time. So be sure to subscribe to the Feature Presentation with Derek Diamond YouTube channel to get notifications on when I go live. And the first show is going to be May 16th, which is 2 weeks from, if you're listening to this the day it drops, will be in 2 weeks. So be sure to subscribe. You can also just subscribe to the audio version. Those will be uploaded every Tuesday morning on Apple Podcast, really anywhere you get your podcasts. I could list all of them, but there are honestly so many that I'm sure there's some that I haven't even heard of either. So that'll be what you can expect from the podcast here on out. And I know that my previous show went through quite a few changes, but in looking back on what made me the happiest and what I think is the most helpful will be to do this format. It's something that, is very accessible, is fairly simple to do, I think. So I'm really excited to be back. I feel rejuvenated, and hopefully you, the listeners, some that, have listened to or watched my shows since the very beginning, hopefully you continue the journey with me as I venture into this new avenue of my podcasting career. You can look forward to that in 2 weeks here on YouTube, as well as other audio means. And also, one last thing I wanted to throw out there before we wrap things up is I will be appearing at the Gulf Coast Culture Fest, which will be here in Pensacola, Florida on Saturday, May 21st. Look up Gulf Coast Culture Fest on Facebook to find out more information about that. I'll be there probably doing some interviews with some local filmmakers, and I'll have a compilation episode that will air probably sometime in June that'll recap my experience with that. So hopefully you guys get some great content out of this. I know I'm really excited for the new direction that the show is taking. Hopefully you are too. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can find it on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcast. Just search for A Feature Presentation with Derek Diamond. And if you could, please leave a review. The more reviews I get, the more visible I become to the podcasting public. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Just search for Feature Presentation with Derek Diamond. And if you have suggestions for content that you want to hear on the show, guest topics, things like that, you can also email me, featureprespod@gmail.com. And that's going to do it for episode 0 of the show. We'll see you guys back here in 2 weeks for the official launch of Feature Presentation.